All right, all right. Okay, well, good evening. Happy Thursday. And welcome to another episode of The Bridge. And today, of course, is going to be another hot one. Now, Denise, I want to start this off with kind of the reason why we even started having the dialogue that led to us wanting to do this show. A lot of people have trauma. Uh, and I don't think anybody has more trauma than Africans who are in America. We've been traumatized for hundreds of years, and we even have, you and I talked about it, and I heard the word before, but you really brought it to me and made me look at it, epigenetics. And so we've got trauma that is on our DNA from hundreds of years of just being abused. But right now, a lot of us are dealing with trauma from family or from our upbringing, whether it was in the house or, in the community, in the school environment, you dig? So we've got a lot of trauma. Trauma is informing our relationships, whether it is love relationships, whether it is family relationships, business relationships, friend relationships. Trauma is informing the way we interact with each other. And one of the things is that's on my plate is I have already thrown an entire family member away because that person acquired trauma in the world and brought it to me and wanted me to absorb it, which for a while I did. I kind of did. She used to wind me up and point me at people. It was beyond having someone as her protector. I was her enforcer. And the problem is that she didn't give a damn about me. She didn't care what happened, what the results were. And that was a problem. So as I got older, I'm like, you know what? This person isn't good for me. Her trauma is coming to my doorstep and creating trauma for me. And so when I went through my whole phase of enlightenment, so that I could become a kinder, gentler Daryl. Um, the first thing I did was I started throwing remnants of trauma away. I started throwing away whatever current traumatic person, place, or thing I could. But unfortunately, not only do we have a situation where a lot of us don't do that, but we have a situation where a lot of people don't even look at it, don't even look at their trauma. People just exist, just trying to make it, and not even understanding. And I don't want the whole show to be consumed. We can do another show to talk about the young lady in Chicago who has created a lifetime of trauma for her son. She herself was operating uh, on trauma. The man who assaulted her was operating off trauma. I mean, there was just trauma to go. They ordered burgers to go, but they were basically in there ordering trauma too because she put her son, who's 15, was he 15 or 14?
14.
15.
14.
14? Yeah. So at 14, this young man has to deal with the fact that he took someone's life. And again, I think most of the discussions I've seen on social media have been problematic because, in addition to the fact that they're celebrating, making jokes about this man who died, the additional problem, and maybe the bigger problem, is that they're cheering the young man like he did what he was supposed to do. It's not what he was supposed to do. Not at 14. Not at 14. And they're ignoring the trauma that he's going to have to carry. Like what's going through his head right now? You're 14 years old and you just killed someone. And I just keep thinking, uh, kind of crazy, the words to Bohemian Rhapsody. Mama just killed a man, and he goes on to talk about life has just begun. That's this young man, because that's where he's at. So, so that's what we're going to deal with tonight. Not that incident, uh, but I wanted to bring that up and put that in the mix because that's a situation where we're dealing with some high trauma, and if that young man doesn't get some therapy, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a huge problem. What was your takeaway? Well, regards to trauma with that situation.
Yeah. It was really difficult to process it. I
Yeah.
mean, all of us have seen, or so many of us have seen the video where this man, hits this woman, which hitting her is not even adequate to describe what he did, because he really tried to decapitate her. Um, so instantly when somebody is behaving that way, that they have to be operating from some space of trauma.
Yes.
For me, I didn't understand how the son is in a position where he comes in with a gun and now has to defend his mother. And as a parent, that part of it really bothered me. And I think that what we as a community have to stop doing is looking at, um, we first of all, we have to be more protective of our children, in general, but also
We
we have to be, unwilling to sacrifice our boys, because while there are so many women, and there was someone who posted on my page, well, calling calling all the other men cowards for not helping, but
right.
then also saying, he did what he was supposed to do, like what anybody would do. He was 14, not 8. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's a big difference between an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old, but he's still a child.
He's still a child.
And
Still a child.
so his whatever innocence he has been taken from him. And so, I just think that, I can't put myself in his mother's situation. I don't think you can ever completely do that, but I would like to think that if I found myself in a situation where I felt threatened, or I see something, because you can't control the behavior of anyone else, you can only ever control your behavior. I would like to think
Yeah.
that I would be thinking, you know what, there's another hot dog stand, or maybe we'll just go to Wendy's and just leave,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
trauma is real. And we see people who are, true story, the first time that I understood about trauma, like really understood how people are operating from it, is literally, I was sitting on the bus coming home from like high school, and the bus window was open, and this older gentleman reached in and like slapped me, and I was like, oh my
Wow.
god. And once he did it, he just stood there, and I didn't know who to feel worse for, me or him, because all I could think of is, for you to do that, you have to be really suffering,
Right.
you have to be really suffering. Um, but in general, one of the things that I've learned about trauma is that it seems to me that as Black people, We've normalized it.
Yeah.
When you look at what happens in families, when there's trauma, when there's a crisis, we can rally around it. Okay, somebody, needs to, we got to get somebody out of jail, or somebody is getting ready to fight, or, somebody got drunk, and we can figure that out. But
Right.
then when it comes to, like, hey, somebody is doing really well and we really need to support them, we have less capacity, it seems to me, to be able to do that. So I just think that, and we understand that our trauma, and I'll stand toe to toe with anybody and say this, and that is that, everything that's wrong in our community can be traced to white supremacy and anti-black racism and oppression. And so we're walking
Absolutely.
around trying to function, and we have to be cognizant that this is none of this is normal, right? None of it is normal, and being aware of it so that we can get the support that we need to deal with it. And sometimes that's professional help, and
Mhm.
sometimes, that may be understanding that there's some that you have to remove yourself from the trauma. So
There are a lot of there are a lot of options. Speaking of professional help, I want to bring our guest in.
okay.
We have a guest tonight who I think will really add a lot of seasoning to a discussion about trauma. And one of the reasons why I thought it was important to bring in an actual professional is because all over social media, and of course in regular discussions too, we hear people talking about trauma. Oh, trauma, trauma, trauma. And so people throw it now as an insult. Oh, who hurt you? That's one of the biggest things that a lot of women like to throw at men when there's a disagreement. Oh, who hurt you? Oh, that's trauma. That's trauma. And I don't think we really understand what we're saying, and we need to try to have more informed conversations. So our guest tonight is Dr. Robert Brodie. He's a clinician in private practice. He has over 20 years of professional experience with a specialization in African American mental health. He's been qualified as an expert in his field, and he's trained other clinicians on the importance of considering and addressing trauma in their therapeutic work. He is also a proud member, Alpha Phi Alpha oh 06.
Hey, fine. Hey, brother.
Yeah. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brodie.
Hey, welcome, bro. Good to be here,
Um,
man.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brodie. That's Denise Young.
How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to be here with you.
All right. So, talking about trauma, and Denise, if you have questions, just you can just jump in. But talking about trauma, Dr. Brodie, I think the first thing that will be important to do is to define trauma. What is trauma?
Yeah, well, trauma is really basically any experience that has happened to you that you could have either witnessed, has happened to you. It could have happened in the communities. It could happen is something that you've witnessed on television, but something that has impacted you in some sort of way that then goes forward and impacts how you function moving forward. So it could be something that happened to you as a child. It could be something you guys were mentioning the legacy of Black people and the things that have happened to African Americans over time. There is an ingrained trauma that we have experienced. But any instance, anything that you have witnessed, heard about, or has physically or specifically happened to you that is impacting your level of functioning. And the thing about trauma is, when I say impacting our level of functioning, we aren't even always aware of how it's impacting us. We don't even know that we've experienced the trauma half the time. Like you said, sometimes we normalize it. That's just day to day. We'll say that's just the house I grew up in, or that's just the neighborhood I grew up in.
Mhm.
We don't even recognize it, but it comes out. And that's the thing about trauma is whether you notice it or not, it's gonna come out in some sort of way. And so it may not come out right now. It could come out 10 years down the line. It could come out in your relationship. It can come out in your parenting style. Hell, it could even come out at work. And you don't connect those dots right away. But it goes back to, any other experiences. And so,
Yeah. So do you think that the trauma that African Americans experience is greater, or is it different? Do we have a specialized kind of, outside of our historical trauma? Do we have a specialized version of of trauma? Black trauma? Is there a black trauma?
well, we have a unique set of experiences that I would say that in this country we've experienced that nobody else has experienced. I mean, there are all kind of racial traumas that have happened to people. I mean, you could talk about the Holocaust. You could talk about the things that have happened to the Native Americans in this country. But here for us, we've experienced something unique to us that no one else can truly understand how it's impacted us. I mean, you have a race of people that were displaced, brought here, and then systematically the laws were put in place to well, we were physically controlled first, then we were legally controlled. So there's levels to this game here in terms of how it's impacted us. And so every race, I would say, has had some things that has happened to them and they've gone through it. We do have our own unique set of circumstances that has brought us to here where we are. And we've all dealt with it in different ways. And some of us has internalized it. Some of us are not even aware of it. Some of us refuse to see it. Some of us try and just hide it. And there are people who have worked through it and they have succeeded, and gone on to benefit in life. But the other thing is, there are times that things that have happened to us, we've turned around and turned it into, again, I'll come back to, we've made it normal. And that's how we treat others. That's how we raise our kids. That's how we deal with in relationships, deal with our peers, deal with our spouses. So we've normalized a lot of what's happened to us to the point of we don't even recognize it anymore. And everyone else is systematically telling us, well, you got to get over it too. So, and move past it. And the biggest thing about that is people will say, well, you weren't even there. You were never a slave. You don't even know when was a slave. This never happened to you. Well, just because it didn't happen to me specifically, again, going back to that earlier definition of trauma, it's something I could have read about, witnessed, heard, or there's still lasting ramifications that impact me, even if I wasn't there at the time of the original incident. Okay, so we still can be impacted by all of these things going forward.
Denise, you had a
Yeah, Daryl and Dr. Brodie, if I may, I just want to share a quick story. When you talked about how others are telling us to get over it, or or even this sort of, as you sort of couched it, Daryl, this special trauma. So one of my professors, she's a professor of literature, and I wanted to do have a focus on trauma in literature, in Black literature. And one of the things that she warned me about is being very clear about where or which university I would choose to do that at, because where she originally tried, because she has a PhD, she was told that she could not, in order for her to have that as her dissertation, that she really had to look at trauma in Jewish literature associated with the Holocaust, because trauma in Black life is so routine and normalized. And so no one else is looking at it like it is something that requires special attention. It's, maybe they are associating it with what is believed to be an inherent violence among us, an inherent brutality. But it shocked me in one hand, but then on another hand, not really, because we just understand how that works. And I told her, I said, well, I will have to be really looking very carefully for a particular English department, because I'm not going to use someone else's Holocaust as my baseline when I know that we have our own. And so yeah, so I that really, that gave me a whole different lens of how we view trauma, but how others view our trauma. I mean, it's really trying to belittle it.
And let me
Absolutely.
just comment on that, because Denise,
Yes,
what you said is, it resonates to me so much, because you're talking about trauma in higher education, or trauma in literature and the perspective in higher education. My daughters, I have twin girls, they're 15 now, and they are in, honors English in high school. And they are experiencing a level of trauma in terms of the books that they're reading, because they're in a class that's predominantly white, and some of the books that they're reading, uh, it, it's just funny, their whole experience going through some of these books, and where the teacher's perspective and how they're teaching some of the things, where, and I'm trying to remember which book it was it Little Women or another book that they were reading, but there was a couple where my daughters were having trouble with how the teacher's perspective on the African American experience in that book.
Yes, yes.
And it was to the point that, they're avid readers, avid learners. They were having an extremely difficult time in this class. And, for them, English should have been a gimme. I mean, they're, average, they love reading, they love doing those types of things. But the experience that they were having was being negated so much by their teacher.
Yes.
So it parallels what you're talking about. I mean, here you are talking about at a higher level institution, you're going on for a doctorate or advanced degree. Um, and how is a 14-year-old supposed to deal with that in the ninth grade also? And so there's some of the similar issues. And though it's starting to be kind of impacted upon them now, that they're going to have to continue to deal with. And one of the things, we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that trauma. Like, well, you tell your kids, hey, this is just how it's going to be growing up. You're going to have to learn now. You have to learn to fight at high school and fight back, and where there are other students who don't have to deal with that extra level of, I got to get ready to go to high school. I mean, other students are just dealing with, oh, how am I going to deal with boys, sports, this and that. My kids have to deal with all of that. Plus, now I got to battle the English teacher when I go in too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my son just went through it. He switched from a private school to a magnet school, and the geometry teacher, white guy, really should be fired,
yeah,
because the way he's dealing with chocolate students as opposed to others is problematic, and those are the kinds of things that I've been, and I'm sure you're also diligent because you got girls. She's got both boys and a girl, but I've been really diligent all along to make sure that he doesn't internalize the trauma that could potentially come from that school environment. You gotta talk them through it. Our parents didn't necessarily. Some parents in our generation did, but some of them didn't necessarily understand how traumatic, or that there could even be that much trauma in the school environment. And it's different for everyone. I mean, I took on a level of trauma that I don't know if all my siblings were dealing with. But I was a black nationalist because of what I read and what I was exposed to. I was a black nationalist by 17. So, some of it was high school, but I went to the University of Iowa. And that was a battle for my very soul that I wasn't prepared for, I wasn't capable of, and wasn't even. I mean, I had an older brother there who I could have discussed it with, but I didn't even have the tools to be able to express to him shit that he was probably going through as well.
exactly.
So we have to be cognizant of trauma in every environment for our children. You
But we
know,
also turn that around sometimes and say, you need to, and because sometimes in my head I'm thinking, well, you need to experience that to help prepare you for the world. And is it true? Do they need to experience that? Because I'm thinking, well, that's what's made me do so well in functioning in this society, because the majority of the positions that I've been in, there's only been a handful of us chocolate people. It's predominated by others. And so I'm thinking, well, you got to get that exterior now. Like you said, you went to the University of Iowa. I was at Irvine. And in my head, well, I got to prepare them now to thicken that skin because it's not going to get any easier. And so what are we doing? Are we reinforcing the trauma? Are we saying trauma is going to be a normality throughout the rest of your life and you just got to deal with it? And no matter what you do, no matter how many degrees you get, no matter how many accolades you have, this is something you're just going to have to deal with. Now, at some point, you're going to be able to fight back at it. But right now, you just need to toughen it up to deal with it. And sometimes that's a perspective that we hold. And I think there's times that I've held that perspective because I know when I'm going into a work environment, I got to put on my mean face sometimes and get ready. And so it's been ingrained in all of us. We've all adopted it. We take it forward. And, I don't even have all of the answers. Well, is it going to end? Because sometimes when we talk about, there's two conflicting things for me. People will say, well, there's an ideal of how the world should be. But for me, there's a reality of how the world is. And so there's the ideal of, yes, our babies shouldn't have to deal with this. Our babies should be able to go to school and just learn and not have the same experience. They should have a similar experience as everybody else. But yet, I can't have them going into there being soft and naive in a world that's not soft and naive. So for me, I have to prepare them for the world that I know that they're existing in now. I would like them to get to that ideal where this is not going to be a issue where they can study whatever they want in grad school, where they're going to have supportive professors. But in my head, I'm still going to prepare you for a world that I believe is not going to be supportive of that. And so, yes, that's how we reinforce this trauma by saying, yes, you need to toughen up now. You need to get harder now because the world is not ready for you to sometimes be so soft and caring. If I'm going to put you into this tough, cruel world, I need to prepare you for that.
That's right. Now, so let me ask you then, is some trauma necessary?
No, no, because I would never want that to be interpreted. It's not necessary. I think it comes back to resilience of the individual. And we as a people are resilient individuals. Absolutely. We have taken what's happened to us and we've learned to move forward, not because of, we don't need it, but in spite of. Okay. So it's that internal resilience and maybe as we flesh it out even more, that's what I'm trying to build is that resilience in our kids that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to succeed through it. We could still hope for that ideal, but I'm going to prepare you for the worst no matter what, so that you can be successful and have the tools to deal with no matter what comes your way. So no, I'm not going to say trauma is necessary because like I said, trauma comes in so many different ways. We're talking about racial trauma. We're talking about global trauma. We're talking about trauma in the house. So I would never want anybody to think, well, damn, do I need to grow up getting hit? Do I need to grow up seeing my mom get beat up? No, in no way. Let me emphatically say, nah, bro. Good. What I will tell you is that yes, we are resilient people. We need to prepare ourselves for what comes forward, and we need to create safe places. We need to create places where we can be safe, but then we also need to create the skills for our kids to when they go into places that are not safe.
That's right. Well, so a couple of comments. Ed Wandrick, what's up, frat brother? He's talking about how you have to be able to tread water, that you have to use, and that's real. You have to use that experience to be able to tread water, to be able to swim. But I think it's a good thing that you pointed out that it's not necessary, but it's going to happen. So you have to be able, as you said, to prepare them for it. I think for me, I would actually prefer that my son have some of the trauma that he's been through because he has me to help guide him through it. I think that some of the trauma that I experienced, I didn't have people who would, I had people who were there. I didn't have the tools to reach out and say, help me get through. Now, some of it, I had some severe trauma that I did. So in my sophomore year in high school, 1 year, I lost my stepfather, who was the man who raised me. I lost my grandmother and my oldest brother. And so that was difficult for me. And, it never occurred to me until I was an adult that my mother was going through some deep ass trauma because she had lost her husband, her mama, and her oldest son. Right. So by this time, it was just, I got a huge family. By this time, it was just she and I. But she had the presence of mind to know that I was going through it, and she saw me slip sliding away. So she marshaled up the troops. She called my older brother. He was coming through. My uncles were coming through, but she also went up to the school, and she got the vice principal. She got the senior military instructor because I was an ROTC, and she basically told him, if he's out of line, put your foot in his ass. And then you call me. Do I need to start sign something? And so, of course, thank God they did more than, they did put their foot in my ass, but they did more than that. These were men who actually came and they were talking to me and trying to help me process everything and move through. So a lot of that trauma, if it hadn't been for her knowing that I needed more men to be in front of me, and she couldn't just tough it out and do what she could. She knew that she needed more. If it hadn't been for that, yeah, I don't know if I where I'd be right now, because that was a lot for a young man to handle, and it yeah, it almost took me away. It almost took me away.
Well, I think one thing we want that's important that we want to clarify is that the difference between trauma and life experience, everybody's going to go through tough times. And so, whether or not we're saying, does somebody have to experience a negative trauma to prepare them for life, or is it that through life, we're all going to have loss? We're all going to have people in our lives that pass away. We're all going to have difficult times. Do we need a structure around that person to help them deal with that? Because everybody's going to experience death or loss at some point of a close one,
Yes.
or some other thing. So, do we want to provide? What we want to do is provide the skills and support in our future and in our babies and our youth, that they're able to either deal with that, manage that, be able to have a support group to deal with some of those things going up. But that's different to saying, do they need to be traumatized purposefully, or it's good for them to experience trauma at a young age for them to be able to develop those survival instincts? No, they need to have a strong family support. They need to have a strong peer support or whatever structure around them, because we're all going to experience things. But do we all need to experience, say, the racial trauma in school, or do we all need to again go back to witness somebody being shot at the liquor store while we were walking down the street and see that? No, we don't all need to see that to be able to grow up and be fully, self-directed individuals. What we need is a strong support group that when things do happen around us, that they're there to come. We need a family to be able to come around us and support us and help us get through challenging times. And there's a small distinction there between, hey, do we all need that trauma versus, yeah, life is going to have its challenges. We all going to be in a car accident. We all going to lose someone. That's different. And those things can be traumatic. But I think sometimes what we're talking about is trauma in the sense of some of those extremely negative things that we've witnessed repetitively over time that make it so normal and ingrained in our personality and in our lifestyle that we're thinking, well, yeah, you got to grow up tough, versus can you grow up loved and supported? And then when someone passes away or you see something, do you have a support group around you to help you deal with that?
So now I want to go back and then I want to jump forward, because one thing we talked about, I do want to get your perspective. Don't want to do a whole show on it, but I do want to get your perspective because it's huge right now. The young man in Chicago who ended up having to take a life, well, not having to, who was put in a situation where he took a life to defend his mother. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we have is um, people are talking about how, oh, that was a good thing because no other man stood up. So he was the man who stood up. People are saying, oh, yeah, that was good for her because this guy was going to kill her. And I guess any and all of that may be true. But for me, and I want to get your perspective, for me, I'm concerned about the damage done to this young man who at 14 literally was walking with a gun and used it to take a life. So, was it justified? We can argue that back and forth. But at the end of the day, in the cold, dark night, he's got to deal with the fact that he took someone's life. What's your perspective on the emotional or mental trauma that might be in that young man's head and heart right now?
Well, I mean, I think I had some of the same thoughts similar to you. My first thoughts were, okay, mom is in trouble. She texts her 14-year-old as to come rescue, which, okay, let me think through that for a minute. Two, the 14-year-old is strapped just on an average day. Like,
Just walking around.
I mean, let's just break that down into, you know, the more incremental values. Like, so mom and son are going to get some chicken. It's a chicken place, right?
Burgers.
A burger. And as routine, he picks, all right, mom, we going out. Let me grab the strap. One mom knows.
Yeah.
So there's levels to this already that we have to get to before we even get to the burger spot. I mean, that mom knows that the child, and I'm not going to get into the whole debate on, you know, the concealed carry. We're talking about a 14-year-old with a gun walking the streets, and mom is aware of it. All right. So again, without passing judgment, we're just identifying the factors here that we're walking through. All right. Mom is in some sort of situation. We'll say that I think before she got assaulted, did she text him, the son? I'm trying to remember the exact
See,
timeline.
now it's not, that part's not clear. I don't think she did it while she was being assaulted, because we see the guy hit her and then hit her some more, and the son comes in and shoots him.
Because
So I
I
don't think
thought she texted him at the beginning, like, hey, there's some trouble here, come in. So even before she got assaulted.
I think
So
that's the only thing that makes sense. I think that's what happened.
again, so we're putting our young boys in the position where he has to be the man of the family, and we're putting him in the position already to where she's looking to, hey, come protect me. Where I think, Denise, I heard you say earlier, why not the first instinct? I got my son with me. It's not worth it. Let me just go ahead and find another burger spot. I mean, so
Whatever.
there's so many things that we get to even before the fact that he had to step up and protect his mom. I'm thinking, you know, in my younger days, you know, I might have been a little rough and tumble, but if I'm going somewhere right now with my daughters and something jumps off, and I'm thinking, even if I think I may have the upper hand, let me get away from here because I got my daughters with me. Or
Yes.
even with my nephew, let me just exit this situation before one, even I don't want them to see me have to get physical with some cat. Two, I don't want them to get caught in the crossfire of having to protect or do anything like that. Let me just exit the situation. Okay.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
but I don't want to come off like we chastising the mom, but there's just so much to unpack here, even before we get to the actual incident.
Well, absolutely. And I definitely want Denise's perspective, but I want to say this. I do have some chastisement for the mom. I'm just going to keep it real, because as a man who is fully capable of boxing with a dude, of knocking somebody out, laying somebody out, I early on in this fatherhood thing had to wrestle with, I'm just going to keep it real. I had to wrestle with whether or not I was being a bitch, because we'd be in situations that pre-daddyhood, I'm going to bring the ruckus to whoever is on deck, right? But having that young man watching everything and the potentiality for him to get hurt, I've walked away from a lot to keep it cool. And so I was concerned, and I know people were like, "Oh, I don't care. He killed that dude, whatever. I don't care. He's protecting his mom. As he's supposed to do." No, he's not supposed to protect his mother. He's 14. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you what I saw in that video. I saw the dude, number one, warning her that he was going to do it. The camera person was his girlfriend who was egging him on. But number two, he hit her, hesitated, and I saw her still being aggressive. Now, of course, she doesn't deserve it. I'm not saying that. I know it's hard for people to process shit because a lot of people are stupid. I'm just gonna keep it real, and they're not really able to listen to what I'm actually saying and understand. I'm not blaming her, but at some point, time to go. Time to go.
Exactly.
That's
At what point does the protective instinct kick in? One, for yourself. Two, I
for
have,
yourself.
like you said, becoming a parent, becoming a husband, it changes your perspective on things. When we were in college, when we were younger, oh, let's get them up, let's go. At
Yeah.
this point, I may walk away from a situation that earlier I may have gotten into. Two, one, because I got a lot more to lose. I may whoop his ass, but then he may come back and then they may be in the crossfire.
Yeah.
Or let's suppose that they aren't even in the crossfire. I'm putting myself in a position where I may not see them tomorrow. Or I
Yeah.
may be, eh, disabled or something. And for what? That's the things that we got to think through.
Or some
And again,
emotion.
just like you said, it's not of course, he shouldn't have hit her. But at what point do you think I'm about to fight this man? I don't know, this stranger on the street in front of a burger place. I got my kids with me. Or in her head is my son is strapped, so you keep pushing it. I got something for that. So
and
that's
and and that's the part that bothered me because I'm just gonna say it. A lot of women think that their man child is the man of the house,
exactly.
and he's not. I mean, that's reason number 98 why I took my son from his mother, because you can't have that kind of relationship and think that you're going to have a healthy child. But so Denise, you're a single woman, and raised two young men, and they're grown and safe.
They are grown and safe. Hallelujah. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is, so as we're talking about this, and as you said, Dr. Brodie, sort of, even before you get to being in the burger joint, there's some incremental things that need to be, broken down. Um, I would add to the list how we as a community view, some of these things collectively, because there should not be any discussion that is cheering or supporting the fact that this woman did not leave out of that place the moment that she sensed, because everybody could sense it, that this is a really dangerous place to be. Dangerous meaning you don't have any control over him, and so then he is an unknown factor because you just don't know what's going to happen with that. So we're having this conversation that is suggesting that this this child did exactly what he was supposed to do. And I am not suggesting that he was supposed to stand there and watch his mother be harmed. What I am saying is that he should have never been in that doorway, right?
exactly.
He should have never been in that doorway. And so what we have happening, as Daryl mentioned, and I posted about it, is this idea that as Black women, particularly single, so many single mothers, and before we get somebody in on the online social media saying I'm not like that, I'm not saying that all single mothers are like this. What I'm saying is that we are seeing too much of that behavior, where we do make our boy children the man of the house. I've always told my sons that you can be a man in my house, you cannot be the man of my house, right? Because you want to recognize that your sons are growing and maturing, and I'm not going to be looking at my 16 or 17-year-old and still calling him boy. Like, that's just not how it should work. But
Right.
I understand that even as my sons were growing into their manhood, right, that there was still the parent child dynamic, and I needed to honor that. So No, you don't need to pay bills in my house. No, I'm not getting ready to send you out in the streets cuz and do what you do. Like, we're not getting ready to do that. I don't need you for emotional support. And we're seeing so many things that I think also cause trauma to Black boys, and I'm sure that Dr. Brodie, you would certainly agree to this, and I know that Dr. Tommy Curry has written about it, and we got to really talk about that as a collective. But the other thing that you said, Daryl, which was, and Dr. Brodie, when you all were talking about the fact that he's strapped, and the mother knew this, and so maybe what she was texting him was like, "Yeah, come on in here," even if she didn't say, "There's a dude in here," just come on in here, because she knew he was strapped. And so I'm actually working on an article about how we are so free to harm Black men, because nobody's even talking about it from that perspective. So it was more important for her, it seemingly, I wasn't there, but from what was presented, it seems to me that it was more important for her to win or be in this space, like, you're not going to tell me what to do and all this other stuff, to versus just leaving, because she had the option of leaving, and she
Absolutely.
also knew she had the option of putting some lead in this brother. So it's very disconcerting for me, for us to be having this conversation where, again, we're looking at this child who's had his, as far as I'm concerned, who's had his innocence just stripped.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's the kind of trauma that Dr. Brodie, too many of us have normalized, and I know that people have normalized it because in 99% of the discussions on social media, that little boy's innocence is never mentioned. Never. These discussions are about how, yeah, if that was my mama, that's what I would do. The discussions are about, yeah, that dude needed to be unalived. These are discussions that people want to have, but not A, she should have got out of there, and B, she should have texted her son, stay out there and call 911. That's, but we don't want to have those discussions. We are, I guess, are we supporting the trauma then by 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 talking about how he did what he was supposed to, and it's a good thing? Is that what we're doing, Doc?
Well, what we could say is, I don't know about if we're supporting the trauma, but what we can definitely say is that child has just experienced a traumatic experience. Okay. So, I mean, whether or not it was legally justified, whether or not in his eyes it was morally justified, because one of the things that you can see is when our soldiers go to war, it is legally and morally justified the things that they do when they go to war, yet they still come back
Mm.
traumatized from the acts that they've had to do. Okay,
Yeah.
so whether or not they were given the green light to do what they were doing, they were trained to do what they do, and these are men, 18 plus, which is still a child, but they're men 18 plus, and they come back traumatized from having done those things. So, but what we know is right now that young man, and again, we have no insight into what's going on with him eh, eh, tonight at night after all of this has gone over, because this is where I always say where things impact you most. It's not while we're in the room talking and we're reliving the story. It's that few minutes when you lay your head down and it's just you alone with your thoughts, getting ready to go to sleep. What runs through your mind? And we don't know what's going through that young man's mind right now versus what's going to go through in 5 years. Does he feel vindicated? Does he feel justified? Does he feel remorse? Does he want to feel remorse but is not allowed to because everybody's telling him you did what you were supposed to do?
Mhm.
Is he angry with his mother? We have no idea. Mom, can you just walk away? Like you always got me in some shit. I don't know, whatever it is. When he got that text, whatever she texts, whether it was a couple words, he knew the situation and to come in ready. So
Yep.
this obviously wasn't the first time a text like that has been sent out, or whatever she conveyed in that text.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
knew It was some funk going on in that restaurant, and I need to get in there in a hurry. So,
It's
however
a whole
way
time.
that was communicated, that likely was not the first time that that's been expressed, or it likely wasn't the first time he
Mm.
saw his mom get down with somebody like that before. So,
Yeah,
again, we're talking about some long lasting stuff. And like I said, when we start to unpack this, it's levels to this. And
right.
everybody don't want to hear about the different levels and everything going forward.
Right. Well, so let me do this. Let me bring this back to trauma that people are carrying. I'm gonna go back to mine, which was my family member sending me in. I mean, literally, she used to wind me up and point me at people, and she thought that was fly. And for her, it was. For me, it wasn't. But a lot of it was happening when I was an adult. So once I shut her down, I was able to move forward. This young man, how is he going to be if he doesn't get help? What are we looking at, Dr. Brodie? Are we looking at someone who at 14 has killed someone, has likely been in a situation where he's either harmed someone or threatened someone with the blick? What are we looking at? Are we looking at the construction of a psychopath? Like, how far down the rabbit hole could it go?
No, no, no. I don't want to jump to that conclusion already. All right,
Okay.
because and I don't want to predestine this young man into something like that. Okay.
Okay.
What I'm saying though is intervention is needed. Somebody needs to talk to this young man, and whether or not he's open to hearing it right now, this thing will come back and impact him in some sort of way. Whether it gives him the scary part about this is, does it start to give you a false sense of bravado that, like, does he feel like he's a Superman right now that
Mm,
I protected my mom,
mm,
I you know I walk around with this, I done shot somebody, it was justified. Does he have now this false sense? I'm worried about the next situation that comes up when, suppose he walks in there and it's not the girlfriend that's videoing, it's the homeboy that's videoing. So suppose both them cats are strapped. Suppose that dude is not alone and it's somebody else, and he comes in there and he pulls out a strap, and his homeboy is, and the other guy's homeboy is back there strapped too. We've now just escalated it to a whole nother level of the game. All right, so I'm not intervention is definitely needed. We need to talk to this young man. We need to
yes, sir.
explore what's going on. We have no idea until we know what's going on in his head. And like I said, incidents like this impact everybody in a different way, and I have no idea until I can sit down and actually talk to you. Does it
Okay.
mean he's going to do it again? No, it doesn't mean he's going to do it again. Does it mean that there's that potential? Well, one of the things that we know is the biggest risk factor for future violence is past violence. Okay,
Right.
so does it make it easier for him to engage in something like that before? I mean, again, potentially. Again, does the mom know that if my son comes in, hey, don't make me call my son? Basically, is what she said. Don't make me call my son. Why? Because implied in this ad is my son's a rider and I know what he's about to come in here and do. Okay. So you've actually
Right.
placed your child in a position that he could potentially escalate and something can go differently. Where we've talked
Yeah.
about before is that the protection instinct for you or for him? So at some point, if we're protecting our child, let me get them out of this situation. I don't want to put my son, I don't have a son, my nephew, in a position where he's going to have to do something to protect me
Right.
because of something I did. I don't want them to have to deal with the fact that, yes, they protected me, but they had to take somebody's life to do that.
In order to do it. Yeah.
Let's try and avert these things before it even gets to that level.
Well, so we've got some veterans listening, and one of them, Scott Bugs Allen, our favorite local musician, he says, being a veteran, this young man has experienced the same type of PTSD inducing episode as those of us who have been in combat with none of the processing ability where and he hasn't been able to be briefed or debriefed.
Bingo.
So okay. So
Bingo. He said it eloquently, beautifully. Bingo.
yeah, because that's pretty much on the same level. So now what I want to go to is back to the premise of the show, talking about traumatic incidents that come from people that we are attached to by blood. What happens then if we're getting trauma from a family member? How difficult it is. And I know the answer kind of from my perspective, because, I will unfriend, uncousin, unbrother, whatever the hell you are, if you call. But I don't think many of or not enough of us have that perspective. How difficult is that to if this young man gets to the point where he's jailed, is there repeated incidents, and it's all because of his mama? How difficult will it be for him without intervention to be able to get up out of that relationship? Is blood thicker than trauma?
Well, the first thing you said is, I mean, you said that you've been able to unfriend, unblood, uncousin, but I don't think you were always like that. That was a
No.
maturity growth process that you got to.
Yes, sir.
So it didn't start off like that. You didn't recognize it at a young age. So that was a process of experiences that you had to go through in your development and your growth to get to that point that you were like, either one, had enough, two, had an insight into what's going on. Because, and that's what it is. It's an insight at some point that, hold on, this situation is not good for me. This
Right.
person is not good for me. But we have that natural instinct growing up. These are the people who, these are our nurturers, our developers. And remember, just because someone, it doesn't mean you can have both. Okay. You can have someone that is extremely nurturing to you and also inflicting trauma upon you.
Mm.
Okay. And that nurturing instinct is typically much stronger than that abusive instinct, that abusive pull. So yes, you can be abused, but it's that nurturing instinct that we tap into because we're biologically connected, you know to family, to our parents, to our caregivers, and that pull is so incredibly strong that even when that person is the person inflicting trauma or pain onto us, our first instinct is not to push away.
Yeah.
We're gonna stay there. We're gonna stick it out. But so what you said was, you described over a period of time, you were able to come to that realization that I need to separate for my own health.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you had some experiences that got you there. Maybe some interactions with some other people, maybe some internal talks, but also some talks with others, some interactions with others that either taught you that what you will be okay without them in your life, or you have that enough that internal strength. And that's one of the things that somewhere in you there was a strength that you were like, I can go on even beyond if I have to separate myself from this person. And what we're kind of describing is this whole intimate partner violence thing, domestic abuse, parental trauma, all of that. The strength to separate yourself, where what we've been taught is, no, this is family and I got to stick and ride or die no matter what.
Yep.
And so that's a process that we all go through. And some may get there differently than others. Some may need professional assistance. Um, but there's really got to be some interaction from the world around you that helps you get to that level.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's heavy duty. And yeah, it was a maturity situation for me, because it did take other people to identify it for me. Um,
Exactly.
because I was placed in a situation by this person where I was literally about to take on a few felonies, and was happy to do it, ready to do it. And my older brother, God rest his soul, got on the phone with me, and he's like, "Sit your stupid ass down," and and broke down the improper relationship between myself and my former family member. And so yeah, so I think we got to get to a place as a people, and maybe we need to talk more about therapy, uh, because we've got this, and you know this better than we know this. We've got this stereotype about getting therapy,
Yeah.
and where does that come from?
I mean, where does it come from? I mean, I, the distrust of the institution and distrust that, I mean, you remember one of the main things, and I'm sure as Black folks, you all been told this: keep our family business stays inside the house. Like
Yeah,
that's one of the first things I learned growing up. Hey, what goes on in this house stays in this house. Everybody don't need to know what goes on in this house.
yeah,
And that, whether it's been overtly ingrained or subvertly, like, hey, family business stays family business no matter what it is.
yeah,
I mean, we've all been raised that way, and so that's one of the first levels of it in terms of going out to therapy. Then there's just a distrust of others in science and things like that. Going back from, I mean, we can talk about the Tuskegee experiment and things like that. Just the distrust of an institution like that, but it's also putting a person in a place of vulnerability to open up and to talk to somebody and to be able to kind of move forward and get help. You have to place yourself in a vulnerable position to disclose to me what's going on. And that's one of the things that, males in general, again, we hide our feelings. We tuck them down, and we're taught to hide our feelings and be
yeah.
tough. Black men in particular, I mean, through my experience, how many times have you ever gone up to another Black man and gotten this response when you're like, hey, how's everything going? Everything's good. I'm great. I'm cool. How many times has anybody ever said anything other than that? No
Not
matter
unless they're
what's going
very
on,
close to you.
unless they're extremely close. However, how many times have you ever gotten any response other than that? There's
Yeah,
times that I've intentionally approached people who I knew from whatever way that I know that they're going through something. I'm like, hey man, if you ever need to talk, or nah, bro, I'm good. As Black men, we are always the first thing we're gonna say, I'm good. No matter what's going on, I'm good. So
yeah,
being able to one get past that and open up for and be vulnerable a little bit. And that's a place that people are uncomfortable with. Hell, I'm uncomfortable with that. Nobody wants to be vulnerable, particularly in front of somebody else. But we have to
yeah.
go through that to progress. All right. And we have to learn that that is okay. And one, it comes from education about therapy. Two, it comes from seeing other people that look like us to be able to talk to us. You know, being able to go to somebody that you feel is going to understand you and that you can connect with. I had a recent experience. I went into therapy with an individual who there was no connection, and it just went bad. Like and this is from me being a trained professional as I am going into this experience. It couldn't have gone even more horribly bad than it did.
Mm.
So we don't need to underestimate that ability to be able to connect with the person that we're in. And I'm not saying that as a Black person you can only go to a Black clinician, but you do need to find somebody you connect with on whatever way that you can connect with that individual. And so then that's a lot of training that we need to go into for the clinicians out there who are going to be working with people of other races, because they need to
Absolutely.
understand the biggest thing about that happens in therapy is 75% of people don't come back after the first session. And why
Mm.
is that? Because something is going on in that first session that makes them not feel safe, not heard, or not connecting. Okay,
Mm.
so as a clinician, you need to work on in that first next session, making this person feel comfortable, explaining the process, explaining your style, and seeing if you are a good fit. So if you back that up a little bit, first of all, it's hard enough to get people into therapy. And then if you say that 75% of them are going to come back after the first session, then what are you left with? All right. So there's a lot of background work we need to do just around the whole issue of therapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Denise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I went in for a therapy session, and that was my son is 20 will be 25. That was 26 years ago, and I've never set foot in another therapist's office. But
Mm.
I know we're going to be wrapping up shortly, but I wanted to come back to a point that you were making earlier, and that was about us having, us suppressing how we feel. We get cues from all sorts of places about suppressing our feelings. So if I'm, thinking about the year 2016, that around 4th of July, and I thought I was losing my mind. No, I was literally having a nervous breakdown, because that's when Philando Castile was murdered, and Alton Sterling were murdered, and it's a day apart. But it was also, at that time, I had just found out about my younger son, who had just had his first incident with the police stopping him on the way home. And the only reason I knew it is because he had asked me to listen to a poem, and he's, reading this poem, and he has a line in there about, you call us animals, but you're the pigs. Now, if that had been my older son, it would have just, I would never have really paid attention to it. I would have been like, oh, dope line. But this was my younger son, who's a bit more mild mannered, and I knew that was not him. And so that's how I learned. He explained to me, I said, that was an interesting line. What prompted that? And that's when he told me that a couple of nights before coming home, that he had gotten stopped by the police, and everything that happened with the incident. But what I want to talk about with, the suppressing of feelings. So I'm now walking around in my job, with predominantly white people, and I'm trying to figure out, why do I feel like crap and no one else does? Like, it's business as usual. Because I know everybody in that office saw the news of where Philando Castile is murdered in front of his daughter. I know they saw Alton Sterling get murdered, on the ground. So I'm trying to, and it's not that you want people to feel the way that you feel. You just want them to know that you shouldn't be feeling this way. And so I literally, for like 6 months, was going to work every day angry and depressed, because I'm like, I don't like that I'm in this space, and everybody else is okay. Like, yeah, you don't have to worry about this with your son. Oh, and by the way, you don't seem to be bothered by the fact that Black men are just being, murdered. So it was, but I felt like I had to suppress my feelings because I'm in this space. So that's unlike anything I had ever felt before. So it was a challenge.
Yeah. And
And
that's, go ahead, Dr. Brodie.
no, I'm saying, Denise, one of the things that you said kind of made me think of something else that happened when you're saying I'm struggling. You say you felt like you were losing it, and oftentimes people will give you those hints, and you may have. If there's people who actually get to the point of tell somebody like, "How are you doing, man? I'm having a really rough day," and other people's response, "Well, girl, you're strong. You can handle it," and it's almost invalidate when people actually do
Yeah.
give you that opening. And when you're actually telling you, no, I can't handle it, I need some
Right,
help
right.
right now. But our response is, well, you strong. I know you can get through it. You can get through
Yeah.
anything. I mean, you resilient. You done raised two boys. You can get through anything. Girl, I know you. You done everything else in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're honestly telling people, no, right now I'm struggling and I need
Woo.
help. And when you do open up, and it takes a bit to get to that point to be able to say that. And
Open
when
up.
you are finally able to say that, people aren't hearing it, and then that instinct comes in. Well, maybe I can get through it, or maybe it's not that important, and then you start to question yourself, or like, well, maybe they don't care. And it's not that people don't care; people just don't know how to deal with it either,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm.
And so you finally got to that point where you're ready to, you want to open up, and people aren't ready to be receptive to that because other people, either they don't know how to deal with it, they're dealing with their own stuff, or it's uncomfortable for them, or they just don't recognize it.
Yeah.
And so our default is, you can do it, you strong, you can get through anything.
Yeah.
And that's heavy. I think my big brother is still listening. Preston James, he's also our frat brother, Dr. Brodie. He said that to me a couple of days ago because I was talking about a family member and I was concerned about my relationship with them and why they didn't do X, Y, and Z because this is what's normal, this is what we use. And he was like, you know what? Sometimes it ain't personal, it ain't got shit to do with you. Sometimes people just have a lot going on. and yeah, and I believe that's the case with this one person in particular. Just got a lot going on, and they got nothing to do with me. And even though I'm trying to talk and I want to process some stuff, yeah, you're right. Everybody's not ready, and it doesn't mean necessarily that they don't care.
And that's where sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, that's why therapy can be so critical, because it's giving you a time to talk to somebody who's there only for you. My job as a therapist in that particular time is you. My whole world revolves around you for that period of time and understanding what you're going through. My job is to try and figure out what you need, what you're going through, and how I can best help you at this particular point. Okay. We have friends, we have support groups, who we have peer groups, we have family, all of that who is there for us, but yet they may not always be there in the moment or understand what to do. There's people who, you know, at, you know, DJ, as a male, you know, younger, what would we say? Somebody come and tell you, "Hey, I'm going through some things." Well, shit, you want to go out tonight and get fucked up? Well, I mean, you know, you know, all right, man, let's go hang out and get a drink then. I mean,
Right.
but that's, I'm
Yeah,
being there with you, but I'm not helping you with that issue.
that's right.
Okay, that's how I. Well, damn, that's rough, bro. Let's go hang out then, man. Let's go get a drink. I mean, that's my idea of being supportive. Okay, and
Right.
that's a huge step right there. But what therapy is somebody saying, "I hear you. Let me find out more about that, and let me use a particular structure or technique to help figure out how to help you, give you the skills to get through that." And that's what we don't get by just going to our girls or our boys or our family. You know, they can be supportive in their way, but they don't know how to truly help us get through that. And they may not pick up on all the little, you know, small signs about things either. So,
Right. Yeah. And I got to say, man, I'm really, really lucky, blessed, whatever you want to call it, to have like a circle. One is my big brother, but also my best friend, who is my line brother. I mean, because that cat, we didn't grow up together, but shit, that's my brother. And it's like, through the years, I mean, he says I've done it for him. And in certain points in my life, I don't know how, because I didn't think I had, that skill set. But it's always been a situation with me. If I call on him, he's not just listening, he's like, oh shit, and responding in a way that he understands, that he's like, let's figure out a solution, even if the solution is let's go to someone else, and I think a lot of us don't have that. And I feel sad for people who don't have that kind of system, whether it's friends or family. It's it's a little scary. And I can't get married if I don't have a woman like his wife, because she's like that not only for him but for me. She, no, what's going on? No, let's fit. And she's like that for her nephew, my son. So when his mom left his life, he had, women, black women who were loving, concerned, who sit in front of him, and they're really wanting to know and understand what's going on. To her, to her point, she was like, if you can't talk to your dad or you don't like his answer, you call your auntie. And that's cool for him to have that early on, because I think those things make a difference, especially for black men.
and I know this is a topic for a whole nother show, but you and I touched on this one time, and you just that statement, you said, I can't get married until, because that's important. What are we bringing from our past into this future relationship? So if we haven't dealt with some of these things that are traumatic or our own personal traumas, all we're doing is bringing that into a future relationship. And that may be the reason for many why relationships haven't been successful, because they're still dealing with something, the baggage, the trauma, however you want to describe it, from something that happened to them 10, 15, 20 years ago, either in a previous relationship or in a previous dynamic, whatever it may be. So,
oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I I don't talk to my ex anymore, but if I did, I would say to her, she was a beautiful woman, she was kind, but she had childhood trauma that caused her to flip the hell out. And it's like, if she could have really taken therapy seriously and got past all the flipping out, there was a lot in her foundation that was beautiful, but her trauma pushed me, not her trauma, her inability to find a way to manage it,
Yeah.
because then she tried to put it on me. She was like, well, you broke me. Nah, baby, you were broken when I said hello. You just hit it well.
Yeah.
So, but let's go ahead and do a wrap up. We'll start ladies first. Denise, closing thoughts.
Yeah. First of all, Dr. Brodie, thank you. I mean, I've been sitting here as as part of the show, but as well as a listener. So thank you very much for that. Um, I think for me, particularly, thinking about all the things that we've talked about this evening, is just that, I would encourage, um, you know, all parents, but specifically, single mothers, let's be more thoughtful about our children, and particularly our sons, and we may not even recognize it, that we are doing things that could potentially put them in positions of harm, put them in positions of witnessing, or experiencing trauma. But let's be more thoughtful about that, because we can create situations that have such enormous impact, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. Dr. Brodie, you want to go next, or do you want to have the last word
No,
before
no,
you?
I'll lend that to you for the last word to close us out. But again, it's good to meet you, Miss Denise, and thank you for your insight. And I guess my plug is for, and I know we can talk about this much more later, but therapy. Um, let's try and demystify it. Let's try and I want people to be more open to it. It's all too common, Denise, what you said. You said you went 25 years ago. Something about that first interaction didn't go well, and it's been 25 years and you haven't been back. So we need to change that. And so there's help out there. There are qualified people out there, but then you also have to. It's like, consider looking at for a therapist the same way you would looking for any other professional, lawyer, barber, anything else that you're gonna maybe talk to some people, read the reviews online. You want to talk to that individual and see if you guys connect. Um, there's a lot of people out there who may not be good at what they do, and it's hard for the average person to just read a bio and look, but there are indicators. You want to look to see how long they've been doing what they do. What is their specialization? The things that you're dealing with, you can read in their bio. Often people on their website, they'll say, hey, I specialize in trauma, or I specialize in issues pertaining to LGBT, or I specialize in issues of violence, or whatever it may be, or substance abuse. So you read, and is there something in there that resonates to what you are dealing with and that you want to? So you don't want to go to somebody who has no experience in the issue that you're dealing with. The second aspect of that, do I need to only go? I'm a black male. Do I only need to go to a black male therapist? Or I'm a Hispanic male. Should I only go to a Hispanic male? Well, it's going to be hard. There aren't a whole lot of race specific or ethnic specific matches out there. The first level of the game is, if you are going through something, I want you to get help. I want you to call in and get help. If you are in a crisis mode, if you're feeling like you're going to hurt yourself, or if you feel like you're losing it, or whatever it may be, I want you to get help. I just want you to find the best clinician out there and get help. First level of it. Okay. Because they can either later on the line provide a referral, but what we need to do is get you some immediate help with whatever's going on with you. Because if you're in a crisis mode that it's getting bad, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this or whatever, you just need to talk to somebody. So I would rather you talk to somebody who is good than just not, because I only want to talk to a black male or whatever it may be. Okay. So then after that, you can do your research and find out, is there, and with the way things are going now with telehealth, you can have access to people across the country. So there may be, a black male in New York who's seeing people. So with telehealth, you can now see that individual. Okay, so there are other options out there. To a certain extent, you got to understand it may cost, and you get what you pay for at times. And um, some of the options are, if you have insurance, there are many good people who take insurance. There are some people who don't take insurance, but we prioritize things in our lives that are important. All right. And sometimes we have to prioritize our own mental health. And if that means that maybe I have to skip a trip or skip some things to be able to get myself right, then you need to take care of yourself. And then you can come back and do some of those other things. Okay. So, foundation, if you feel like you're going through something, go ahead and get help. All right. If you feel like you are critical right now, you call 911 or you call a suicide hotline. Okay. The first level of the game, like I said, is get help immediately if you feeling critical. After that, we find a therapist that is a match. When you call somebody, talk to them for a minute. If they don't want to give you a few minutes just to talk, if they're not open to answering your questions, then you already kind of got a vibe of what it's going to be like in therapy, so you can just move on to the next person. You are not going to work out or match with the very first person you call. So you may have to try a couple. All right. And then you will find the person that you feel comfortable with, and then hopefully you guys can go ahead and work and get things done. So um, get help if you need it. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, whew, thank you, frat brother. I think one of the things that black people have to start doing, not just with their mental and emotional well-being, but also with their physical, financial, the whole person. We have to start trying to be healthy in as many ways as possible. And I think a lot of us, we get out and we make a couple of dollars. We might find somebody that matches with us, and our trauma, individual traumas don't trigger each other, so we can get along. But I think we really, as a people, need to heal. That's why, for me, when I hear black people talking about reparations, I'm like, I don't know if that's going to happen. Tony Brown, the noted journalist, also our frat brother, said, I don't know what white people owe, but what I do know is that they don't want to pay. Um, so instead of us only focusing on reparations, we need to focus on repair. We need to really, really fix ourselves. And so, that old saying, let there be peace on earth or whatever, let there be this, that, and the third, let it begin with me. I try to do that. I try to spread that. I try to, talk to people and push them towards either getting help or, give them a good word. But yeah, black people, we need to get therapy if we cannot get through to being able to sever relationships that are just not good for us. If you're continuing, especially if you're an adult and you still got somebody traumatizing you, yeah, sometimes blood ain't thicker than bullshit. And you gotta make, a choice. And if you need therapy to get through that, that's okay. Letting people go, that's okay. That's a good way to live your life. Dr. Brodie, I'd love to have you back again because
Of course, bro.
this was dope, and I appreciate you. So, let's make it happen. Thank you, Denise, and thank you to everybody who's listening now and who's
Thank you,
gonna
Brother
listen.
Daryl.
Uh, there it is.
There it
All
is.
right. Thank you for listening to The Bridge.